every major World War II war crime in 21 minutes by simple paint. I wonder. I wonder. We see plenty of things here, so yeah. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. Funny that it has the usual, the thing there, the mark. We'll see. Anyways,
Nanking Massacre. On December 13th, 1937,
we start with a massacre. Oh well, it won't load. It does.
2 years before Hitler invaded Poland, in what many historians see as the true beginning of World War II in Asia, Japanese forces captured the Chinese capital of Nanking after weeks of fighting. What followed became one of the most brutal atrocities of the Second World War. For 6 weeks,
Isn't it funny, right? Isn't it funny, like, all the atrocities that the Japanese committed, right? And then they just switched over to kawaii des, and everybody forgot, right? And I get it. I get it. That is a skill that not many seem to have. Like, sorry, Japan, I just forget about everything. You just got me with your romance anime at this point.
Japanese soldiers murdered at least 100,000 Chinese civilians and disarmed soldiers. Most estimates put the toll between 200,000 and 300,000.
Damn. Damn, that's some high casualties. That's some high numbers. Yeah, they really went at it. The Japanese during World War II were some real psychos.
The killing took many forms. Mass executions were carried out along the Yangtze River, where thousands were lined up, machine-gunned, and their bodies dumped into the water. Soldiers went house to house, dragging out men for execution. Chinese prisoners of war were marched to designated killing grounds, tied together, and shot. Historians agree that sexual violence was widespread during the massacre, with countless women and girls assaulted and many not surviving the attacks. John Rabe, a German businessman who
You could have not! You talked about the sexual violence thing, right? And then you mispronounced the name completely. How do you essentially talk about grape and then just mispronounce the name that horribly? It's John Rabe. It's Rabe, not Rabe. What is this? Wow, that's crazy right there.
stayed in Nanking, established a safety zone that sheltered about 200,000 civilians. He and other foreigners documented the atrocities in diaries and photographs, smuggling evidence out of the city. Minnie Vautrin, an American missionary, protected thousands of women at Ginling College, though soldiers still broke in repeatedly to drag women away. The Japanese military covered up the massacre initially, and when reports reached the
I mean, that is, at the end of the day, the ultimate respect, right? You're gonna bear our children. That is the ultimate disrespect. I mean, we did kinda kaboom twice, actually. The bomb was so effective, they went the cutesy route.
outside world, they were dismissed as propaganda. After the war, the International Military Tribunal for the Far East held trials in Tokyo. Commander Iwan Matsui was convicted of failing to prevent the atrocities and was executed in 1948.
Goodbye! Well, that doesn't change much, actually.
Lieutenant General Hisao Tani was executed by Chinese authorities in 1947 for his direct role in mass killings. Yet many perpetrators were never prosecuted. The massacre remains controversial today, with some Japanese officials and textbooks downplaying or denying its extent, causing ongoing diplomatic tensions with China. Unit 7.
Well, and with the fact that Japan wants to increase its military power again, we'll see how that goes.
31. Between 1936 and 1945, the Japanese Imperial Army operated a secret biological and chemical warfare research program in Manchuria known as Unit 731. Under the command of Lieutenant General Shiro Ishii, the unit conducted grotesque experiments on living human subjects, mostly Chinese civilians, Korean prisoners, Soviet prisoners of war, and others deemed enemies of the state.
Interesting. Okay. So Chinese civilians were involved. That makes sense. Korean prisoners, obviously, that makes sense. Well, Soviet prisoners of war, I did not expect to happen. Right? Enemies of the state, that makes sense, right? But like Soviet prisoners, I did not expect that for them to be included.
At least 10,000 people were killed in the experiments themselves, and some researchers argue that tens of thousands more died in field tests across China. The facility, located near Harbin in northeast China, was disguised as a water purification unit. Inside, prisoners were infected with diseases like plague, cholera, anthrax, and typhoid to study the progression of infection without treatment.
Bro, they really just sat there, gave them some shit, and then just looked and watched what would happen. Crazy work.
Subjects were dissected while still alive and conscious to observe the effects on living tissue. Frostbite experiments involved freezing limbs and then testing different methods of thawing them.
What the fuck? The Japanese were freaky during World War II. Interesting. Very freaky.
Reports from former staff and post-war testimonies describe that some prisoners had limbs amputated and reattached to different parts of their bodies.
What the fuck? No wonder. You just moved that freaky shit over to anime and that's it. Yeah, understandable.
Others were placed in pressure chambers until their eyes popped out or were spun in centrifuges until death.
Damn, so they basically were treated like some dog breeds, right? There are some dog breeds that if they would jump off a couch, the eyes would just plop out. Crazy.
Flamethrowers and grenades were tested on live prisoners tied to stakes. The unit also conducted field tests, releasing plague-infected fleas over Chinese cities, causing outbreaks that killed tens of thousands. Water supplies were poisoned with cholera and typhoid.
No wonder that the Chinese see them as such crazy ops. Ah yes, let me see what's going to happen if I melt off the frozen limb of this person. Pretty much.
Contaminated food was distributed to villages. Prisoners were referred to as logs, dehumanizing them completely. Guards were told that the subjects were not human, which made the torture easier to carry out. As the war ended in August 1945, Unit 731 destroyed most of the evidence. Buildings were blown up, remaining prisoners were killed, and documents were burned. The staff fled back to Japan. After the war, the United States granted immunity to Ishii and his top researchers in exchange for their data on biological warfare. This information was considered too valuable.
Damn! The US was just like, you know what? You can survive. We'll just take the shit that you made and like we're gonna see how that works.
To lose, even though it had been obtained through mass murder. No one from Unit 731 was prosecuted by the Americans. Some members were later tried by the Soviet Union in the Khabarovsk war crimes trials in 1949, where 12 were convicted and received prison sentences. Ishii himself lived freely in Japan until his death in 1959.
Bro just could chill. Japan again. Because the Japanese were on demon timing during World War II. Like, they did some heinous shit.
Bataan Death March. On April 9, 1942, after months of fighting on the Bataan Peninsula in the Philippines, approximately 76,000 Filipino and American soldiers surrendered to Japanese forces. It was the largest surrender in...
Let me guess, it's Japan again. It is Japan, guys, it's Japan again. Like I said, the Japanese were in demon timing.
In American military history. What followed was a forced march that became one of the most notorious atrocities of the Pacific War. The prisoners, already weakened by months of combat, disease, and starvation, were forced to march over 60 miles in tropical heat to prison camps. Japanese guards showed no mercy. Anyone who fell behind, asked for water, or tried to help others was beaten, bayoneted, or shot. Prisoners were packed so tightly together that some suffocated. They were denied food and water for days. When they reached artesian wells along the route, guards often refused to let them drink or shot those who tried. Some prisoners were forced to sit in the sun for hours without shade. Others were buried alive. Dysentery, malaria, and beriberi killed many during the march itself.
Yeah, it's just very interesting. Yeah, the Japanese, they did shit. And they didn't really answer to that really, right? Again, they went the Ubu route. It makes sense, right? Bombed so hard, you just gotta sit down and put on the maid outfit. But yeah, interesting. Another one.
These lined the roads. Some estimates suggest that between 5,000 and 18,000 Filipino soldiers died, along with 500 to 650 Americans. Those who survived the march reached Camp O'Donnell, where conditions were equally horrific. Overcrowding, lack of sanitation, and disease killed thousands.
So overcrowding, living in your own stuff, and disease killed another few.
More in the following months. At Camp O'Donnell alone, approximately 1,500 Americans and 26,000 Filipinos died within weeks of arrival. The death march became widely known after the war through survivor testimonies. General Masaharu Hama, who commanded Japanese forces in the Philippines, was tried by an American military tribunal in Manila in 1946. He was found guilty of war crimes for failing to control his troops and prevent the atrocities. Hama was executed by firing squad on April 3, 1946.
Damn! Execution through firing squad. Interesting. Well, that's rough. It's 5, still no power. Somebody didn't pay the electricity bill, I tell you. It's not the heat.
Other officers involved in the march were also tried and executed. Katyn Massacre. In early 1940, thousands of Polish military officers, intellectuals, police officers, and other members of the Polish elite were held in Soviet prison camps following the Soviet invasion of Poland in September 1939. In the spring of 1940, following an order signed by Stalin and the Politburo, approximately 22...
Damn! Another 22,000 just gone through the invasion by Russia. Interesting. Or the Soviet Union in this case. Interesting. Yeah, those people... Interesting. I didn't even know that existed.
1,000 prisoners were secretly executed. The largest group, around 4,400 officers, were taken to the Katyn forest near Smolensk, where they were shot in the back of the head and buried in mass graves. Other executions took place at prisons in Kalinin and Kharkiv. The victims included military officers, doctors, lawyers, professors, teachers, engineers, and priests.
Damn! You just got everyone. You just had everyone in here. Everyone that holds some form of higher education or military power. Interesting.
The goal was to eliminate Poland's leadership class and make the country easier to control. Their bodies were then
So basically, just more communism. That's the result of communism. Easy, huh? Cool.
transported to burial sites. The Soviet government denied involvement for
People say that communism isn't nearly as bad, is it?
decades, blaming the massacre on Nazi Germany. In 1943, when German forces occupied the area, they discovered the mass graves at Katyn and used the discovery for propaganda purposes, though the evidence they presented was largely accurate. The Soviets continued to deny responsibility, even charging German forces with the crime during the Nuremberg trials. Poland was under Soviet control after the war, so public discussion of Katyn was forbidden. Families of victims were harassed or imprisoned if they spoke out. It was not until 1990, during the Glasnost period under Mikhail Gorbachev, that the Soviet Union officially admitted responsibility. Documents were released showing Stalin's signature on the execution orders. In 2010, the Russian State Duma issued a statement acknowledging Soviet responsibility and expressing regret.
Interesting. Okay. So they just completely denied what was going on, and that's it. That's it. Until the Glasnost period, and then they blamed it. Wow, the Nazis were correct about something. Crazy work.
However, Russia has resisted labeling it as genocide and has not prosecuted anyone. Memorials exist in Poland and abroad, and families of victims continue to seek full justice and recognition. Manila Massacre. In February 1945, as American forces closed in on Manila to liberate the city from Japanese occupation, Japanese troops trapped inside began a systematic...
What were they feeding and giving the Japanese during... Bro, if you left the Japanese just do whatever, right? At this point, right? If you just let the Japanese do whatever they wanted, bro, you'd now speak Japanese. Imagine that. We'd all speak Japanese at this point. Isn't that crazy? Absolutely heinous.
Campaign of killings, brutality, and destruction that lasted nearly a month. The Manila Massacre claimed the lives of an estimated 100,000 Filipino civilians, making it one of the worst urban atrocities of World War II. Japanese forces, knowing they were defeated, turned their rage on the civilian population. Admiral Sanji Iwabuchi ordered his naval troops to defend Manila to the death rather than retreat as ordered by General Tomoyuki Yamashita. As the battle intensified, Japanese soldiers went neighborhood by neighborhood, killing...
That's diabolical, bro. Nobody gives a shit about Japan anymore. Is that crazy? That is crazy. That is actually insane. No wonder the Germans and the Japanese got along so well. Or, they only took a little bit of time to finally give an apology in 2010. It's just a little bit of time. It's just like 70 years or so.
entire families. At the Red Cross building, soldiers killed doctors, nurses, and patients. At the German club, they locked refugees inside and set the building on fire, burning hundreds alive. Those who tried to escape were machine-gunned. At the Bayview Hotel, Japanese troops imprisoned and repeatedly assaulted hundreds of women and girls. At Paco Church, soldiers killed priests and civilians sheltering inside, then burned the bodies. One of the most horrific incidents occurred at the Manila Cathedral, where soldiers massacred refugees, including women and children, with bayonets and grenades.
That's crazy. We're losing. Well, guess everybody has to die. If I can have Manila, so can't you. Cleanses the entire place. Wow. Like I said, the Japanese are quite involved in here.
Destruction was not random. Buildings were systematically blown up or burned. By the time American forces secured the city on March 3, 1945, Manila was in ruins. After the war, General Yamashita was tried by an American military commission in Manila. Although he had ordered a retreat from the city, he was held responsible for failing to control his subordinate, Admiral Iwabuchi, who died during the battle. Yamashita was convicted and executed in February 1946. The trial was controversial, with critics arguing that a commander should not be held responsible for subordinates acting against orders. Oradour-sur-Glane. On June 10th,
French, I am assuming, something like that. Yeah, okay. So basically, the Japanese just went out of their way to absolutely, just delete everyone on in that place. Wow.
10th, 1944, just 4 days after D-Day, men from the 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, surrounded the quiet French village of Oradour-sur-Glane in central France. The unit had been ordered north to help repel the Allied invasion, but was frustrated by resistance attacks along the way. They decided to make an example of the village. At around 2 p.m., SS troops sealed off all roads and ordered every resident to gather in the village square for an identity check. The soldiers claimed they were searching for hidden weapons and resistance fighters. The men were separated from the women and children, who were locked inside the church. The men were divided into groups and taken to barns and other buildings around the village. There, machine guns.
Yeah, they just didn't check for weapons. They just eliminated them completely, which is the reality here.
Had been set up. Without warning, soldiers opened fire on their legs, aiming to wound rather than kill outright. Then they piled straw and wood on the wounded men and set them on fire, burning them alive.
They really wanted them gone, damn!
Those who tried to escape were shot. In the church, the women and children heard the gunfire and began to panic. Soldiers then carried in an incendiary device, possibly a smoke bomb or explosive, and detonated it. The church filled with thick black smoke and flames. As women and children tried to flee through the doors and windows, soldiers fired on them. Inside, mothers suffocated or burned to death with their children. One woman, Marguerite Ruffanche, survived by jumping out of a window behind the altar, though she was shot and wounded. Out of 642 people in Oradour that day, 190 men, 247 women, and 205 children were murdered. Only 7
survived. Wow. Again. Crazy.
Survived. After the killings, the SS looted the village and set fire to every building. The entire village was destroyed. The soldiers left the bodies where they lay. When French authorities arrived days later, they found charred remains still inside the church and barns. The ruins were left untouched by order of Charles de Gaulle as a memorial. After the war, 21 men were tried in 1953 in Bordeaux. 14 were German nationals from the SS, and 7 were Frenchmen from Alsace who had been forcibly conscripted. The trial caused controversy in France because punishing the Alsatians divided the nation. Most received light sentences, and many were released within years. Baben Yar. On September 29th and 30th...
Well, here's the option, right? You either do it or you die. That's like the thing. Well, then again, I feel like I'd rather die.
1941, in a ravine called Baben Yar on the outskirts of Kyiv, German forces carried out one of the largest single massacres of Jews during the Holocaust. In just 2 days, 33,771 Jewish men, women, and children were shot and killed. The massacre was organized by SS Obergruppenführer Friedrich Jeckeln and carried out by members of Einsatzgruppe C, along with German order police.
Damn. Damn. My voice is dying. Help. Damn. That's a lot of people. Once more. That's a lot of people.
Ukrainian auxiliary police, and Wehrmacht units. Following the German occupation of Kyiv, officials posted notices ordering all Jews to assemble on September 29th, claiming they would be resettled. Tens of thousands
Yeah, they were just not being resettled. They were just like taken out there or put into camps.
arrived, believing they were being evacuated. Instead, they were forced to walk toward Babin Yar. As they approached the ravine, they were ordered to hand over valuables and remove their clothing. Groups were then marched to the edge of the ravine, forced to lie face down on top of the bodies already there, and shot in the back of the head. Layer after layer of bodies filled the ravine. Witnesses described the earth moving for days afterward as victims who had been buried alive tried to claw their way out. The shootings continued in smaller numbers over the following months. Jews who had been in hiding, Roma people, Soviet prisoners of war, Ukrainian nationalists, and psychiatric patients were brought to Babin Yar and killed. By the time the Nazis
Yeah, remember, if you were like disabled or mentally ill, they would still get rid of you, right? Let's not forget that. That is something that really nobody really talks about, is that they just like nuke disabled people.
treated in 1943, an estimated 100,000 to 150,000 people had been murdered there. Before leaving, the Germans tried to destroy the evidence. In August 1943, they forced prisoners to dig up the bodies, burn them on makeshift pyres, crush the bones, and scatter the ashes. This operation lasted weeks, and those who participated were then shot to prevent them from testifying. After the war, the Soviet Union suppressed the Jewish identity of the victims, instead referring to them only as Soviet citizens. No memorial was erected for decades, and the site was neglected. It was not until 1976 that a monument was placed at Babin Yar, and even then, it made no mention of Jews. Only after the fall of the Soviet Union did Ukraine
Oh, wow. That took very long. Wow. They took their time to acknowledge what was happening there.
begin to properly commemorate the massacre. Several perpetrators were tried after the war. Paul Blobel, the officer who organized the burning of bodies, was executed in 1951. Others received prison sentences, but many escaped justice entirely. Dresden bombing. On the night of February 13, 1945, the British Royal Air Force launched the first of several massive bombs.
Yeah, Dresden was completely obliterated. Just completely gone. Just completely wiped. Completely destroyed. Yep.
Raids on the German city of Dresden. Over 2 days, British and American bombers dropped nearly 4,000 tons of high-explosive bombs and incendiaries on the city, creating a firestorm that consumed much of the historic center. The death toll has been debated for decades, but modern estimates suggest around 25,000 people were killed. The bombing of Dresden remains one of the most controversial Allied operations of the war. Dresden, located in eastern Germany, had relatively limited heavy armaments industry, but was a major transportation and administrative hub, and by early 1945, it was filled with refugees fleeing the advancing Soviet army. By February 1945, the city's population had swelled from around 640,000 to over 1 million. On the night of February
Yeah, you could see how that was very questionable. Consider this. If they did that, right, and it were more, right, and it was essentially a hub for refugees, that could have gone quite badly.
13th, over 700 British Lancaster bombers attacked the city in 2 waves. The first wave dropped high explosive bombs to blow out windows and expose building interiors. The second wave dropped incendiaries that ignited the exposed structures. The combination created a firestorm, a phenomenon where fires generate such intense heat that they create their own winds, sucking oxygen from surrounding areas and reaching temperatures over 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. People in bomb shelters
980 degrees. Wow, that's warm. That's hot.
suffocated as the fires consumed all available oxygen. Those who emerged into the streets were caught in winds strong enough to pull them into the flames. The heat was so intense that bodies were reduced to ash, and survivors described
Damn. Damn. Imagine you stepping outside and you just get sucked into the fire like a fiery tornado.
seeing people turned into human torches running through the streets. The next day, American bombers arrived to continue the assault, targeting the city's rail yards, but also hitting residential areas. In the days that followed, German authorities collected bodies and burned them in mass pyres in the Old Market Square. The destruction was immense, with over 1,600 acres of the city center reduced to rubble. After the war, the bombing was criticized even by those involved. Air Chief Marshal Arthur Harris, who planned the raid, defended it as a legitimate attack on a transportation hub supporting the German war effort. The Allied justification was that Dresden's rail yards were vital for German military movements on the Eastern Front. However, critics argued that by February 1945, Germany was already defeated, and the bombing served no strategic purpose.
Also, if you just want to get rid of the rail yards, why did you not just get rid of the, like, that argument doesn't count, right? Why would you not just get rid of all the rail yards? That doesn't make sense.
The controversy intensified because Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels exaggerated the death toll to 200,000 or more for propaganda purposes, a figure that was later repeated by some historians and sensationalized in the post-war period. Modern scholarship has debunked these inflated numbers, but the debate over whether the bombing was a war crime or a legitimate military action continues. Tokyo firebombing. On the night of March...
Interesting. Now, let's see. That is, I think, that was napalm. I could be wrong, though.
9th, 1945, 334 American B-29 bombers flew low over Tokyo and dropped nearly 1,700 tons of incendiary bombs on the city. The attack created a firestorm that killed an estimated 100,000 people in a single night, making it the deadliest air raid in history. The bombing was ordered by Major General Curtis LeMay, who had grown frustrated with the limited effectiveness of high-altitude precision bombing against Japanese industrial targets. He decided to switch tactics, targeting entire urban areas with incendiaries designed to ignite the wooden structures that made up most of Tokyo's residential neighborhoods. The bombers flew at low altitude, between 5,000 and 9,000 feet.
Yeah, and this was probably one of the worst things they have ever done. Probably to a degree just as deadly as the bombs, right?
To avoid Japanese fighter planes and improve accuracy. They dropped M69 incendiary cluster bombs that scattered smaller bomblets filled with napalm. The bombs ignited on impact, spreading fires that quickly merged into a massive inferno. The fires generated winds of over 100 miles per hour, creating a firestorm similar to Dresden. Temperatures reached...
And you have to remember, napalm just doesn't just chill, like, out, right? It'll just continue to burn until it actually runs out.
1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt glass and metal. Canals boiled. People leapt into water tanks to escape the heat, only to be boiled alive. Others suffocated as the fires consumed all oxygen. Thousands were trampled in the panicked evacuation. Survivors described the air itself catching fire and people being turned into human torches. The firestorm burned for hours, destroying over 16 square miles of the city. An estimated 1 million people were left homeless. In the months that followed, American bombers carried out similar raids on dozens of other Japanese cities, killing hundreds of thousands more civilians. The strategy was to break Japanese morale and force a surrender without the need for a ground invasion. After the war, the firebombing of Tokyo and other Japanese cities was not prosecuted as a war crime. LeMay himself later admitted, "If we had lost the war, we would have been prosecuted as war criminals."
Probably, yeah, very likely, right? That's a, and then again, right? Japan didn't really pay much here for what they did as well.
The bombing is remembered differently in the United States and Japan. In America, it is often justified as a necessary step to end the war and save lives that would have been lost in an invasion. In Japan, it is commemorated as a tragedy that killed tens of thousands of innocent civilians. A memorial hall in Tokyo honors the victims, and the bombing remains a painful chapter in Japanese history. Panerai Massacre. Just a few miles outside...
Okay, who is in... I've not heard this one, so I am curious. Who is the one who did something here? I'm curious.
Vilnius, Lithuania, in a forested area...
In Lithuania, this could... So there's two options here. It's either the Germans, it's either the Nazis, or it's the Soviet Union.
Called Panerai, also known as Ponary, German forces and their Lithuanian collaborators murdered between 70,000 and 100,000 people from July 1941 to August 1944. The vast majority were Jews, making Panerai...
Again, not surprised at all. Okay, so it was the Germans and the Lithuanians. I did not see that coming.
One of the major killing sites of the Holocaust in Eastern Europe. Before the war, Panerai was the site of partially completed fuel storage tanks, dug deep into the ground, but never finished. These pits became ideal for mass executions. After Germany invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, Einsatz's commando units, supported by Lithuanian auxiliaries, began bringing Jews, Soviet prisoners of war, and Polish intellectuals to Panerai. Victims were told they were being taken for labor assignments. Upon arrival, they were forced to strip,
Again, naked, strip, and then just like down.
hand over valuables, and stand at the edge of the pits. They were then shot, and their bodies fell into the mass graves below. The killings took place nearly every day for 3 years. Entire
Every day for 3 years straight. Diabolical.
families were murdered together. Lithuanian collaborators often carried out the killings under German supervision. In September 1943, as Soviet forces advanced, the Nazis attempted to destroy the evidence. They forced Jewish prisoners, chained together, to dig up the bodies, burn them on pyres, and crush the bones. This group, known as the Burning
Yeah, enough of that. As usual, they were shot.
Brigade, worked for months in unbearable conditions. On April 15, 1944, 11 members managed to escape through a tunnel they had dug. Their testimonies provided crucial evidence. The rest were shot before the Germans fled. After the war, Soviet authorities downplayed the Jewish identity of the victims, referring to them only as Soviet citizens. No memorial acknowledged Jews until after Lithuanian independence in 1990.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, the classic. Fun fact. The pattern. Yeah, it's pretty much the same pattern, right? If it works at one place, it works at another place. Also, fun fact. There's a lot of stuff that happened to Jews even in the Soviet Union. They were not saved there either.
Today, the site is a memorial and museum. If you'd like to see more stories like this,
Diabolical video, not gonna lie. Did not see all that coming. Anyways, what do we... At least we can memorize the patterns when somebody does something, I guess. That's interesting. Yeah, the last one I did not know. The last one I did not know. The March I did also not know. Those two I did not know. But yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. Wow.